For today's episode of the Pathmark Presents podcast, I have an interesting guest here with me today. I am with Joel Garthwaite, and he's the VP of Marketing at GetBusy. And basically, GetBusy is a task management solution, which, actually, I'm not going to dive too much into it, but essentially, it lets you, for example, secure clear requests to individuals within teams that you're working with. But we really want to dive into this, what that really means, and why are they secure, why are they clear. So really figuring out what GetBusy is all about. You can check it out at getbusy.com while you're listening in. So get a feel for what the product is all about. So Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, maybe in your own words, right? Typically you're much better than me summarizing what your folks are doing. So, what is GetBusy all about?
Yeah, cool. I think GetBusy has changed a lot in the last year. Essentially, we're a publicly listed software company in Cambridge, in the UK. We have several pieces of software under our group, but I'm in charge of the marketing for GetBusy, which is the company name as well as the product name. Conveniently, makes it a bit easier to remember. And it's an awesome cloud-based business tool which you can use on desktop, browser, or mobile app. And what it allows you to do is a huge range of things that you'd normally need a load of different apps for or software tools for. So it's a communications platform that feels very friendly to work in, much like WhatsApp. It's a task management system, which hopefully takes all of the best bits of task management from some of the bigger, heavier systems that are out there and just takes the bits that we have learned are useful to customers. There's a built-in e-signature solution inside it. There's a document portal and management system. You can use it as a version control system. You can use it with internal teams and external clients. So it pretty much does most of the things that businesses would need to run smoothly and efficiently in a digital age.
Very cool. I mean, the website speaks a very clear and succinct language when moving through the page. So definitely everybody who's listening in, check it out. So there's some very nice little animations going on to explain what Joe was just saying. So who would be using it, right? You mentioned obviously it combines a couple of forces that you would find somewhere else. Like who would be the typical company or maybe even champions within those companies bringing in the product?
Yes, I think one of the best things about GetBusy is that we genuinely think it benefits any business of any size in any industry. It makes my job really hard as VP of Marketing to kind of to delve into those verticals and channels, but it presents us with a unique opportunity because essentially if you're a business that wants to streamline your communication, your task and document handling processes, we think you'll really love it, and those kind of businesses will get the most benefit out of it. The core of our current users sits kind of within the financial services market, accountancy firms, HR companies, kind of businesses that kind of do a lot of passing and forth of documents, approvals, things that need signing off, maybe contracts that need signing, and for businesses that kind of are looking for a way to communicate internally that is a bit more business focused. So I guess, the thing about GetBusy is it breaks everything down into single tasks rather than having a big thread, which might say, create a new website, which is a huge project. You wouldn't work in GetBusy in that way. You'd break it down into all of those component parts of what is required to create a new website. So whereas Slack can get really kind of noisy and you're buried in loads of channels and there's a lot of chit chat in there as well as work, GetBusy is really a place you go to work if you're working within an internal team. Anyone can be held accountable for something. So if you and I are working on something, we can pass the ball back and forth. So no one is under any illusion as to who is supposed to be working on what. So if you're looking for a bit more accountability in the way that you work, it's a really great solution for that too.
Very cool. And what type of roles would be the individuals that bring in the solution? Because obviously it has a couple of angles to it, an e-signature angle, communication type of angle. Like is that like an operation, head of operations? Is that a CEOs even? Like who's bringing it in?
I think it depends. It's a good question. I think it depends on the size of the business. So for some of the smaller businesses that we work with, like SMEs, the managing director who is kind of in charge of bringing in tech solutions might look at it and go, right, we can see where the benefit of this is for the business, and they are more likely to onboard it. Whereas for larger size companies, perhaps with a user base of over 100, it might be someone in charge of streamlining operations, or it might be someone in charge of looking at compliance, because communication is encrypted with GetBusy, and if you're sending confidential information, is a far more secure way to do that than email, for example. So it might be a compliance officer. If a company is lucky enough to have a chief information officer or an IT officer, it might be those as they look to improve their tech stack as well. So, and it could actually be, we've got quite a few companies that we support who have brought it in through the people actually using the product, which is really nice. We have a free trial so people can go and try it, and they end up really liking it and championing it from the ground up. So it might be a project manager, for example, who's really enjoying using it on a particular project internally, and then they take it up the chain, much in the same way as Slack did upward marketing internally, and that's a really nice thing for us as well.
Cool. You alluded already to the fact that as a VP of marketing, the challenge is there, obviously, that there is such a broad user base. Like, what is a typical journey that somebody would be going through in order to get to know GetBusy and getting started? In other words, like, what would be the main sort of, acquisition channels that you guys leverage?
Yeah, so we try and run, a genuinely a multi-channel marketing program here. There's loads of different ways that we acquire our business. So we would use paid social to raise awareness for smaller size businesses and businesses who may not be aware that they have a problem that we solve. We would use paid search for businesses who already are perhaps looking for a particular solution to a problem and they're actively searching to solve it. We use direct email marketing to a pretty extensive database of current and past users. The product has moved on a lot, and we're dropping features weekly. So, that database is really important for us. We have an affiliate program for resellers, a webinar education series. Most recently, we've started some direct channel marketing as well with integration partners. We've literally this week launched an integration into the ERP space with NetSuite. So that is a huge opportunity for us. One of the biggest ways that we win business is through referrals from existing customers. And we try really hard to make a product that businesses find genuinely useful. So when those businesses refer us to other users, we get a huge kick from that. I'll probably miss some stuff off the list, but I think
it gives a general
exactly.
It gives a general understanding. Maybe what listeners very often ask us is, especially trying to sort of like map like size and industry to different growth strategies. Like, would you consider you folks more on the inbound side, more on the outbound side? Like, what is the split? You mentioned the email outreach, but obviously also a lot of like inbound happening. Like, how would you define that?
Yeah, we do a lot of testing on those things. We came out of a huge test before Christmas where we put a substantial amount of budget towards testing an inbound model, particularly on paid search and paid social, with kind of limited results. So there's nothing wrong here at GetBusy. We try and make decisions quickly and either prove things or disprove them. It doesn't matter if they worked or didn't work. We just try and do that really quickly, so then we can adapt and look at a better strategy to do it. So we tested the inbound model pretty robustly before Christmas, and took the learnings from that. And now we're in the process of testing a slightly more direct approach. So we're doing a lot of outreach, a lot of education work, and we're kind of working with these channel marketing partners a lot more and leveraging their sales team within the integration space. I think for businesses, for heads of marketing and so forth, it's about not being afraid to fail. Test something properly, put a proper budget behind it, and see the results you get. If you kind of spread yourself too thinly, I think you don't get the results that perhaps you would need to make an educated decision.
Makes a whole lot of sense. And thanks a lot for sharing that, because that's sort of, really some nuggets of insights for listeners. Maybe talking like a second about the website, right? Because on the Pathmonk Presents podcast, we quite naturally talk about the site. What role do you attribute to the website at the moment?
Um, it's a gateway, really, I guess, into the product. I think as a SaaS-based tech company, a lot of websites, as you probably know, have a certain look and feel, and they're pretty conservative, I would say. They use a certain type of language, and they're quite verbose in the language that they use. It's slightly overcomplicated. So what we've done with our website is really try, even though we're a B2B product, we try and humanize it as much as possible. So everything that you see on there, from the color palette to the hand-drawn illustrations to the words that we use, we try to kind of make it resonate on a human level with people. So the website for us hopefully gives a flavor of us as a company, as a group. So not only for the product side of things, but if you were to come and work for us, the kind of environment that we operate in and the kind of experience you would have working here. But also hopefully it kind of gives enough of a flavor as to the features as well. You know, we don't want to kind of push people to demo so heavily that, you know, you go through the website and you still don't understand what we do. We're still working through these things as well, Lucas. You know, it's we haven't got the answer in terms of, you know, what is the perfect website, what is the perfect amount of content, what is the perfect amount of product that we show. We're still working it out, and you know, we use data to help us make those decisions. But hopefully, you know, the website is the starting point in the customer's journey, and we can encourage people then to go through that journey, maybe book in a call with us so we can tell them more, or they end up in our blog space and start to consume some interesting content that's not just about the product, and start to build a bit of an affinity with the company and the product.
Yeah, a huge shout out to your illustration team. I mean, I think it's quite interesting how like these hand-drawn illustrations create a feel of ease and a feel of like lightness in all using a product, because a lot of products can feel very heavy and technical. So very well done.
Yeah, I'm delighted to hear that. You know, we worked really hard to create that feel. You know, a challenge is to trying to integrate that into the product itself, because it's really easy for us as marketeers to go, yeah, we can make it look like whatever you want, and we'll put it on the website and it looks super cool. But then the actual product itself, you know, which has it needs much more rigor, and it needs a more defined experience for the users, more formality to kind of get through the UI and the UX. It's more difficult to weave in that personality, I feel, into the product, but it's something we're trying really hard to do. As you know, a lot of products do feel really heavy, and there's millions of menus, and you need a degree sometimes to be able to operate them. And GetBusy is definitely not that. Even though it's a B2B solution, we want to make it feel easy to use, intuitive, light on its feet. And, you know, I think we're getting there with that.
Very good. Is there anything, you know, when talking about the website, where you see room for improvement? Right? Because maybe one question that comes quite often up in the podcast is, you know, the sort of maybe competition between a free trial and a demo request, for example. You know, how do you think about that?
Yeah, again, we try these things. That's you know, we've tried pushing to demo a lot as the main CTA. And you know, we've got the results for that, and then we'll perhaps try pushing more to a freemium model, you know, to the free trial, and take away the human connection. That, because, you know, for £10 a month per user price point, the product shouldn't really require too much hand holding through the process. So if it starts to feel like a really complicated journey for people, where they submit their data and then we've got to have an hour's conversation with them to explain how the product works, you know, people are not interested in that. And I think we've got a lot to learn from our B2C kind of friends in terms of how they interact on that kind of smaller transactional level. And I think the price point is important, because if it was a £10,000 a year piece of software where people kind of almost expect that heavy hand-holding training kind of thing, but you know, the end of it, even though it's packed with functionality, and you know, we are incredibly rich in features for the price, don't get me wrong, we like to think that the product should be able to do onboarding as much as it can itself without that level of hand-holding. So you know, there's a lot. You said, you know, what is there to learn from the website and what improvements could be made. I think the customer journey, we're constantly learning. We look at data, and make those decisions based on what people are doing, rather than me just sitting in a room going, I think. I think there's too much of that. We need to look at what the users are doing, what the prospects are doing, and then we'll kind of shape the website accordingly to help with that.
Very, very good. I would love to tap a little bit into sort of, your brain for more like high level marketing topics, right? More something, that you've been learning along the journey. I would be curious, right? In today's day and age, like what do you as a VP of marketing consider to be the challenge when bringing innovation into the marketing team or marketing function?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think we've got to think about how people interact with information and how they respond to things that get put in front of them. There's obviously these trends which have happened over the years as to how people engage with content, and we've gone through many cycles of it being needing to be this, and it needs to be that, and it needs to be short, and it needs to be long, and it needs to be behind a paywall, and it needs to be written by an expert, and it needs to be written in-house. And we go through these kind of cyclical things, trends, I guess. But I think to be truly innovative, you've got to understand what the problems that you're trying to solve for the user, because you want to make it genuinely useful for people, right? So regardless of what I think is innovative or what the team here thinks is innovative, if it's not going to resonate with our user, then why are we doing it? Is it just to be innovative? If we're looking at a new format, or if we're looking at a new way of delivering messaging, or if we did a podcast, for example, what would people engage with that? Is the user persona likely to respond to that? And again, that's kind of driven by data as well. So we are hugely behind being innovative and trying new things. We'd never done webinars, certainly not kind of to the professional level that we were doing them. So they weren't just standard, one of us in the team doing a kind of product demo. It was, we get a proper expert in to talk about something that is actually useful and going to move businesses forward. We'd never done that before COVID, and we would, we'd go and do event stands and have a presence at conferences and so forth. But as soon as that got taken away from us, you have to be a little bit nimble and think, well, what can we do to continue to kind of add value to people's experience and make it useful for them? So hopefully we are innovative. We've got a culture here of try anything. If we're going to fail fast. So, innovation and disruption is important to us. And the disruption thing you alluded to with the website, hopefully we're a bit different in the way that we look and feel to some other SaaS companies too.
Very cool. I want to switch gears a little bit, right, and talk about your own journey. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you educate yourself, because obviously there is tons of marketing content out there. How do you filter? Like, how do you pick what to engage yourself with? Is there something that you could share?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of information out there. There's a lot of books, and there's a lot of so-called influencers, and it seems like marketing topics on LinkedIn, for example, is the next biggest thing when underneath recruitment, probably, which is what it was designed for in the first place. There's just a lot on there, and I think filtering through trust is important. Look at people that have got results, and they've seen success, and they've actually done things rather than they just say things. I think that's super important, because I could just tell you a load of stuff now and say, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. But if it's not from a place of experience, and it's not from confidence, saying, right, I've seen this work in these circumstances under these conditions, then it's pretty meaningless. You're just regurgitating things that you've read from MBA books or from marketing gurus. It's a trust thing. I normally I have a few people that I follow on the usual kinds of things like LinkedIn and Twitter and so forth. And I try to keep things fairly light, to be honest. I'm not one who will hyper-analyze, methodology as such. I try and keep on top of it as much as I can, but really it's about trying things that sometimes you have a gut feel as well. I think that's really important for marketeers, especially for creative marketeers, is to kind of go with your gut, and have the confidence to say to the team, look, prove me wrong rather than I need to prove you right. And obviously that requires a supportive team to do that and trust in you. But yeah, I love a business book as much as anyone else, and a marketing book. But I think ultimately you need to work and read from the people who you trust, and trust your own instinct as well.
Yes. Since we're slowly coming to an end of the interview, I would love to jump into our rapid fire questions. There's a couple of short and crisp question answers. You ready for those?
I give them a go.
You mentioned books there. What's the last book that you actually read?
The last book I read was Kipper in the Snow, which is a children's book for a 4-year-old. I guess that's not much use for listeners. But the last marketing book I read was the newest version of Non-Obvious by Rohit Bhargava. And I'm currently trying to get myself through Barack Obama's A Promised Land on Audible as well, which is about 20 odd hours. It's a tough one.
What's the one single thing that your company is focused on the most at the moment?
Growing within the ERP space.
If there would be no boundaries in technology, what would be the one thing that you wanted to have fixed for your role today?
No boundaries. I think having everyone working back in the office safely. I think it's been a huge boundary for us. We've made it work, and we're lucky at GetBusy because we have technology and software that allows for remote working. That's why we've done so well out of the pandemic. But I guess people work a lot better when they can have that time to connect, and I don't know, a magical tree that prints money and can only be used by me for the marketing department.
Yep.
Have one of those too.
Very cool. What's the last thing that kept you awake at night about the company?
Nothing keeps me awake at night, to be honest, apart from my 7-week-old son. My mother used to say I could sleep on a chicken's lip. So yeah, nothing keeps me awake at night.
Very cool. And the last question would be, if today would be your very first day working with GetBusy, what's the one advice that you would give yourself?
That's a good one. I think I started to GetBusy 1 week before we went into lockdown, March 2020. So it wasn't the best start, but the company I think handled the whole remote working thing superbly. But I'd probably make more of an effort to speak to people individually rather than in a group, and get to know them a bit more outside of work. So it wasn't possible to have drinks or social events. So I think we've really missed out on the opportunity to connect with co-workers over the past year or so. I think when you can build that connection with people outside of work, you work better in work as well. So maybe I would have made more of an effort to, do some individual Zoom calls to those people rather than just in those large group meetings.
Very good. Actually, a very practical one for people joining companies at the very moment. So Joel, I really appreciate that you took the time with us today on the Pathmark Presents podcast. Maybe I want to give you the last word. If somebody would be forgetting all that we discussed, what's one thing that they should remember about GetBusy?
One thing they should remember about GetBusy. Our name was inspired by Jamaican reggae star Sean Paul's 2003 hit GetBusy. Now, it wasn't really, but hopefully that's more likely to stick with you and help you remember it.
Pretty cool. Thanks for being a part of Pathmark Presents.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.